we're going to offer all the contents of the universe. It's kind of a curious offering, actually. You think about it. Why would you sit here thinking you're offering all the universe? It's a nice idea, you know. So if we don't know the Buddhist cosmological view of the universe, we think of the world that we know and all the marvelous things in the world that make people happy, basically, which is the contents of the universe, all the nice things. So we're thinking of piling them all up and making an offering. Of course, we offer to the Buddha as a request for the teachings. That's the meaning behind it. And I'm sure in the Gompa, because it's starting a new module, onto module 7, we're more than halfway through. I think we're halfway through 7. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. How come we're doing 7 and it's only 6 months? September, October, November, December, January, February. Oh yeah, that's the 7th month, isn't it? It's very amazing. 6 months we've done already. It's so incredible. Gone like a dream. Module 7. And we're going to make, and I'm sure in the Gompa they're going to make a mandala offering, as well as offerings of representations of the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened beings, as a cause for us to achieve that ourselves. So we're thinking like that as last.
Yes, Tara will screen share.
Or who's going to do?
And I will video. Here we are. Sashi perki yukshing metok tramri rablingji nidegyan body sange shindu mehte owagi doku nam da shing la chepak shok jetsun lama dam pakenam keche kikala ken seche cintri jita sampe du jesin mala sabge che chapa Vaptu so.
Oh, idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niyatayami. We imagine Buddha happily receives our offering. How wonderful. Thank you so much, Nina, and everybody, the team in Zurich. So now we set our motivation, as the Lamas would say, and we remind ourselves of the reliance of on Buddha, his teachings, and the spiritual community. So the first 2 lines, we'll say the first time in English, and I'll put extra words into it so we get the meaning clearly, and then I'll sing it 2 times in Tibetan. So what we're saying is, until we're making this aspiration, until we are enlightened, we will rely upon the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. And then we think, and by the virtuous karmic seeds we plant in our minds, by listening to these teachings, may we become a Buddha, so that we are able to benefit every single suffering sentient being. Sangye chadang soke chognam la jancho badu dagni kyabsu chi dagi chanyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupha shog. Sangye chadang soke chognam la jancho badu dagni kyabsu chi dagi jenso gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupha shog. That's it. Thank you very much, Tara and Lars. So again, I'm really hoping you've got your course notes, and I really hope you study them carefully, because in each of these course notes, these people who've taught them over the years ago, all these different teachers have done such a good job, okay, covering all the main points. I mean, honestly, when I look back, and I don't necessarily cover all the main points, I might take a different perspective. So the words that I'm saying, and that all the discussion that you are doing, and the reading of these course notes, and you have a good basis for understanding each of these topics, you know. So in the framework of the entire Lam Rim, where does this particular topic fit? Because basically these 13 modules is the presentation known as the Lam Rim, but in a slightly different order, you know, slightly different order. So for example, we start off, don't we, with the mind. But the traditional Tibetan presentation of the Dharma, which is what the Lam Rim is, because there's such an assumption about what the mind is, that doesn't need to be pointed out. But there is a tradition of this. I think one of the first books that got published in English. I think the Jewel Ornament of Liberation or something. I think it was a Kagyu text. There they actually do start with the nature of mind. And in fact, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, when he started teaching foreigners, mostly people from the West, the very first time in Kopan, he of course would start with the mind because it's so radically different. The Buddhist view is so radically different that if you don't start off understanding what Buddhism means by the mind, then it's just peculiar. You can't understand anything, you know. So that does start, we just start with the mind. That's the first one. But basically, if we look at the structure of the Lam Rim, what we're discussing here, we're still in the middle of this first of the lowest scope of teaching. So already we've done 6 modules halfway through, but we're still in the middle, the first scope, the lowest scope of teachings. As we know very well, this structure is divided into the lowest, as Lama Zopa politely would put it, honoring the lineage. It's the teachings and practices suitable to the disciple of the least capability. And then the middle scope is the teachings and practices suitable to the disciple of the middle capability. So, I mean, if we look at all the modules so far, let me just get them and I'll show you. We'll just have a look at it. We'll remind ourselves the topic of each one. So first scope, that's it, the mind and its potential. The second one is how to meditate. So that normally does not come at all in the Tibetan tradition in this place, because that's such a huge deal in our culture, you know, this idea of meditation. Traditionally in the monasteries, you know, they first in the monasteries, they study the text, they learn debate, they do lots of prayers and practices. That's kind of inbuilt, but they might not learn actually the meaning of meditation until they're much older. So, but it's something that suits the Western, the modern mind. So that's coming in second, you know. The third one, there it is actually the entire presentation of the whole Lam Rim. That starts there. And then by the time we get to module 4, we start getting into the details of this Lam Rim. About here, this is the fourth one. This is the spiritual practice, the spiritual teacher, the spiritual mentor, because that's something that Tsongkhapa added in the 14th century. In the traditional Lam Rim, coming from Atisha, he starts with this preliminary contemplation. We need to think about this precious human rebirth. So that's, you know, that's module. I think what did we do for module 5? No, we even missed that completely. We don't have it as a topic. But that's the first one that Atisha gets us to think about, to prime our mind to want to not waste this precious life, you know. So think about this preciousness of this human life. Then the next one, we now enter into the path, into the first scope, the lowest scope, and we then look into death and impermanence. That's the very first one in the Lam Rim. But for us, like module 5, that's when it comes. This is the very entry point into the lowest scope of the teachings. We went into that in detail. And what the particular framework here is so that we don't want to waste this precious life. Then the next module, 6, as we know, you know, the death and impermanence one, I mean, we don't even go much detail into that. We didn't even do one at all about the lower realms. In Atisha's text, he gets us to think about death and impermanence first, in the first scope. Then he gets us to think, well, given that I could die, I will die, and I don't know when, then he gets us to look at the likely possibility of types of rebirth. So this is that one that completely freaks out. You know, Lama Zopa's courses back in the 70s were famous for him spending 3 of the 4 weeks of the entire course detailing all the different hell realms. I mean, it's like complete insanity from Western hippie minds, you know, but Lama Zopa he went along because that's where it fits, you know, that's where it fits in the teachings. It's so utterly abstract for us. And in this Discovering Buddhism, we don't even discuss it, you know. But the one we do discuss now is where we come to the point of wanting to practice. That's the culmination of the lowest scope. We start to learn about the fundamental principles of good ethics. And the background to that why we want to learn about the view of karma, why we want to learn about why be ethical, the Buddhist reason is very, very, very specific. You know, it's because we don't want future suffering. So, you know, I always point this point out, but it's a crucial point to keep remembering. When you listen to the Christian teachings, for example, Jesus will also tell you not to kill and not to lie and not to steal. But you ask him, why not, Jesus? And he will say, because God says so. That's that's what valid, that's what labels something, that's what defines something as being wrong. This priest, I always quote this priest I asked, he said, natural law has got something to do with it, but the main one is it's God's law, that he says don't kill. So you break, when you kill somebody, you break that law, and that's when you commit a sin. So the reason Jesus exhorts us not to kill and not to lie and not to steal is because God said. But the reason Buddha exhorts us not to kill, not to steal, and not to lie has got nothing to do with his saying so. He is merely a messenger. This is the crucial point. For the Buddha, you know, it's natural law. And so why he gets us to abide by the laws of karma, because that's the method. That's the method. At this point in the Lam Rim, we think about death and impermanence. Why? To wake us up, not to waste this life. Then we go to the next one. We think, well, if I'm going to die, and I could die soon, what are some of the options of my future rebirth? And then we get these detailed descriptions from all the ancient texts of the likelihood of the suffering of the lower realms. So, of course, for Buddhists in other cultures, this is fitting completely. But for us, it gives us complete panic attack, you know, because Buddha does assert these different realms of existence. And all this is relevant to refuge, because then the Buddha gets us to abide by the laws of karma. And the crucial reason, the fundamental reason, is if you don't want future suffering, if you don't want that future suffering, then the method to stop the future suffering is to stop causing it. Because this is the crucial point about karma for the Buddha. He's not a creator. He's not a punisher. He's not a rewarder. He says, don't kill and don't steal, don't steal, Rabina, because they will sow seeds in your mind that will program your mind, that will produce that exact type of suffering in the future. That's what we try to get our head around with karma. It's not punishment. It's not reward, because there's no punisher and there's no rewarder. But this takes us a long time to kind of get our head around, you know. So refuge has got completely to do with this point. So refuge is where we home in and we decide, we've committed at this point, we can decide if we want to, no one has to, that you've decided that you want to commit yourself for your benefit. You want to commit to entering into this path, to commit to abide by the laws of karma, because you're taking this as your working hypothesis. You know you don't want future suffering. You're taking this view of karma, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama calls it, literally, he calls it self-creation. Buddha's telling us we create ourselves in just the same way that we know very well. We get this when it comes to the physical world. We know very well, if you don't want future ill health, if you don't want to be obese, if you don't want cancer, if you don't want diabetes, if you don't want ill health, then you have to start now creating the cause by stopping causing future ill health. We're not surprised by that, but it's a big surprise to us when it comes to spirituality and it comes to ethics. In other words, the basis for good ethics in Buddhism is like good physical health. It's mental health. You don't want future suffering for your body, then you don't cause it. You don't want future suffering for your future life, then you don't cause it. That's the basis in Buddhism, because we are the one who cause our future happiness and our future suffering. This is the point that really takes us time to think through, because we're so used to hearing it as punishment and reward. That's a very deep instinctive response, you know. So refuge, our topic now, is where you home in on this commitment and you decide, okay, I'm going to formalize my decision to abide by the laws of karma. I'm taking Buddha's view as my working hypothesis. This is the one I've decided. That's if you want to. Of course, you don't have to commit. And that you've got to formalize that in this approach called taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And then also, I think in here we talk about taking the 5 layperson's vows. Sometimes that's taught when we get to the next scope, the middle scope. But we're still here in the lowest scope, in the teachings and practices suitable to the disciple of the least capability. We're still there, halfway through the modules, you know. So then, okay, so then we've done the one of karma. We've looked some at the fundamentals of karma, how we create it. And then we also did look there at vows. We did look at the powerful way to ensure that we really do program our mind very well with virtuous karmic imprints, and then how to purify non-virtuous karmic imprints. So we did look at that in the framework of karma. So with refuge, it's very typical when you formalize your refuge, it's then that you usually take the vows. You know, you don't take the vows before you've formalized your commitment to being a Buddhist. And that's when you formalize taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So that's where we're at now. It's a bit like, you know, you've looked into all the ill health, you realize you're overweight, you realize you're getting sick, and you've looked into the causes of it. And now you know you don't want that for the future. You don't want future obesity. You don't want cancer. You don't want diabetes. And so then you hear about nutrition, which is hearing about karma, you know, using the analogy, and then you really commit to it. You enter into courses on good nutrition. You commit to doing it every day. You find the particular doctors or nutritionists whom you want to rely upon. You then do the courses, you study with those people, and you really go deeply into committing to that good physical health. Here we're talking about good mental health, quite literally. That's the analogy, you know. So, okay, refuge. Well, first of all, the simplest way to put the word, it really means rely upon. That has the meaning. It has the meaning of relying upon. So when you're committed to future good health, you need to rely upon a certain nutritionist, a certain system of nutrition, and then you rely upon the person. You need to look at the person who thinking like that, the person who created that system, and then you rely upon their teachings. It's pretty evident. And then, of course, because it helps us, you rely upon this community of people who are also practicing those methods for good health. It's like that, just like that. So there's 3 jewels, they call it. This is the term that I don't know how long that's been around, probably since the time of the Buddha, you know. We rely upon the 3 jewels. We take refuge. So, taking refuge is a very sweet concept, isn't it? When you have problems, you take refuge in something or somebody to support you, you know. That's the meaning, taking refuge in, relying upon, you know. So the first thing we take refuge in, rely upon, is the Buddha. So we've talked a bit about this when we talked about the mind, but let's look at what it means, the Buddha. Buddha, the word Buddha. We mention this often, and it's really delicious, you know, I always mention this. But the actual word, the etymology of it really tells us so much. Lama Zopa says it from time to time, but sort of in passing. But I find it a very delicious thing to hear, to listen to think about. It tells us a lot. The first syllable, and it's the same in Tibetan, the word Sangye, Buddha. The first syllable implies the utter eradication from our minds of all afflictions, all delusions, all neuroses, all mental problems, all attachment, all anger, all jealousy, all pride, all these simple words that we are so familiar with. And you could even say, using modern psychological terms, all OCD, all PTSD, all depression, all the bipolar, all the schizophrenia. These are the words we use, isn't it, for mental suffering in our culture. And what Buddha is telling us by this word, because he became a Buddha, so that's it's implying to us, if this word implies the eradication of all that suffering from the mind, it tells us he must have come up with some methods. It's pretty evident, isn't it? So this is kind of quite shocking. And I always say this, but we should stop and listen to this. We can say it so casually, but it's absolutely insane. We've really got to listen to it instead of just hearing it as like religion. I remember one time, one woman who came to a teaching for the first time, and we discussed this, and she wasn't being cynical. She was loving the teachings. She burst into laughter. She said, "This is completely ridiculous. What are you talking about? You wouldn't be a normal human being if you didn't have anger, attachment, depression, blah, blah, blah." But that's how utterly our models of the mind talk. So this is why Buddha is so outrageous. It's almost like ridiculous. So because we assume a normal person has anger, attachment, jealousy, these simple words that Buddha uses for mental ill health. No, he doesn't say OCD, he doesn't say PTSD, but that if he can translate them exactly, when you hear the meaning, you can translate them exactly in Buddhist terminology, because the mind is Buddha's expertise. So that's the first syllable. This is shocking already that Buddha he's suggesting that we can accomplish that. He's telling us that he accomplished that. But not only can we rid the mind of all the neuroses, all the delusions, the da or the sgye implies the development literally to perfection of everything else in our mind. Love, wisdom, compassion, forgiveness, all the good qualities. All the good qualities. See, what's I think fascinating in the modern psychological models, if we think about OCD and we think about PTSD and we think about bipolar and we think about all these terms, right? We don't immediately put the opposite to them. We don't say, well, love must be the opposite of that. Compassion must be the opposite of that. Peace must be the opposite of that. We don't think like that. It's a very, very different way of presenting the mind, Whereas the Buddhist view, you've got the positive states of mind, which are the direct opposite of the negative ones, the unhappy ones, the deluded ones, the suffering ones, the afflictions, the mental illnesses, which is a really good translation. So it's a very different way, because it sounds like religion, It sounds like what we think of as religion, and we do not equate religion with psychology. But the difference is, for the Buddha, he is only talking about the mind. He doesn't have an equivalent of a soul. He doesn't talk like that. We don't need such a thing. So we've got to be clear these words so we can know how to equate them, how to understand them, not just learn them like a bunch of religious words without thinking, Because this is a mind-blowing concept. It's astonishing that you've got a system of ethics, a system of psychology that tells us, and this is the point that Buddha's talking about, and we talked about this in the very first module when we talked about the mind, that this is Buddha's fundamental point, that he has found from his own direct experience that all minds, all mind possessors, which is the lovely Tibetan word that we translate as sentient being, but I think mind possessor is so much more delicious. It's the Tibetan word sem chen, having mind, a haver of mind, a mind possessor. That's the term we translate as sentient being. I think sem chen is much more delicious. So there are trillions, as we've talked, there are trillions of mind possessors pervading the universe. There's never any less and there's never any more, because from the Buddhist perspective, minds are beginningless because we don't have a creator. Minds are the product of cause and effect. And if minds are the product of cause and effect, by definition, you can't have a first cause. All these things we have to think about to get our head around this concept of the mind. But particularly here, because we're speaking from the Mahayana Buddhist view, this level of the teachings in the Lam Rim is not Mahayana. You've got Hinayana very simply, and you have Mahayana, or Hinayana, or that's the prevailing teaching of those is the Theravadan teachings in the countries like Burma and Thailand. And in fact, Theravadan is one of the only remaining sub-schools of the 18 sub-schools, I think, of the Vibhashika or the Satantrika system of philosophical tenets that did exist at the time in India. There's many variations of these Buddhist tenets. And the Theravadan is probably, I think I've heard, is the only remaining one of the 18 of this particular system, you know. But generally, we would refer to that as the Hinayana. So the lowest scope teachings about impermanence, the lower realms, karma, are all teachings shared by all the Hinayana practitioners. That's the characteristic of the teachings, is that they're Hinayana. They belong to this level of practice. Then now, and then this is what we're discussing here, refuge and taking refuge in the Buddha is spoken about here in reference to the Hinayana teachings. The goal here from the Hinayana point of view isn't to achieve Buddhahood, because that's not posited as a goal. They would say that some, you know, you can become a Buddha, some people can, but it's the goal of most people is to achieve liberation from suffering and its causes, which is presented in the Four Noble Truths, which we'll talk about in the middle scope when we talk next module in April. But the goal is not Buddhahood, but because here we're on the Mahayana path and we're speaking about this level of the teachings in reference to the Mahayana path, we have in our mind that our goal is to become a Buddha. But here, the discussion about a Buddha is as the first of the three jewels, the person we rely upon for our methods of getting rid of suffering and its causes. So we're looking at what a Buddha is, because that's what we're going to rely upon. So Buddha, like I'm saying, is a person who has rid the mind utterly of all delusions and developed to perfection all the goodness, speaking really simple terminology. As we discussed in the mind module, we looked at how the Buddhist psychological model, you talk about you've got negative or neurotic or deluded states of mind, we have positive or virtuous or that, you know, good states of mind, and then we have this third category that I like to call the mechanics, which is intention, attention, concentration, discrimination. They're neither virtuous nor non-virtuous, but they're crucial states of mind. We looked into that in the mind module. But here, a Buddha is a person who's rid the mind completely and totally. And this is a Hinayana teaching. That itself is not a Mahayana teaching. The second one, if you like, where you've developed the mind to perfection, that's the Mahayana component. What happened? Someone's agreeing with me. I'm very happy. Good, Cyril.
Sorry.
Okay. No, don't worry about it. It's perfect. Nothing wrong, Cyril.
Actually,
so, okay.
Can I?
What?
Can I ask a question?
Okay, go on.
It seems like to eradicate the mind from all suffering and neurosis, and since the mind is a product of cause and effect, seems like the easiest and quickest way is just to realize emptiness and realize that the mind does not exist from its own side.
It is easy. That's exactly right.
But then what I don't understand is how, if you realize emptiness and you realize that the mind doesn't exist from its own side, you obviously eradicate all the neurosis from the mind. But then how do you, from this emptiness, where does the compassion from others come from?
I know, but that's a whole different discussion, and I'm not going to answer that here, Cyril. You'll have to wait. Okay. Of course, this is where, so there's an assumption in what you're saying, a misconception about emptiness. So I don't want to address that now. If you can just relax, put it on the back burner, and we'll get to that eventually. Okay.
Okay.
This is a fundamental misconception in your question.
Okay.
So we can just leave it there for now and try and just stick where we are at the moment, Cyril. It's a very good point. Thank you so much. It's a very good point. So the point is here then, okay, what we're looking at, the Buddha's view of the first goal, because in this Hinayana level of the path, the goal is to basically graduate at the middle scope. At the first, this is the wisdom teachings. You control your body, you think about impermanence, you think about the suffering of the lower realms, you decide you don't want future suffering, you abide by the laws of karma, you take refuge in the Buddha, you then would continue on this path, you'd get renunciation, you'd go to the middle scope, you'd look at the mind, you'd understand the delusions, you'd eventually get shamatha, you'd eventually realize emptiness, and then, honey, you are out of here. You wouldn't come back. That's the level we're at here. But here our bigger framework is the compassion wing, and we're going to move on to the next scope, which is the great scope, where we now add compassion to the mix. And that's a good point, Cyril, but I need you to really just wait and relax about that. So, okay, so then what we're looking at is the possibility, which we discussed in the mind module, of how the mind can be freed of all delusions. But here, in reference to understanding that we're relying upon the Buddha, we need to understand the second part, which is the Da, which is the development to perfection of all the goodness, all the virtue, all the compassion, all the wisdom, all the compassion, all those qualities. So it's to see the possibility of that this is viable, this is doable. And that's, of course, a big ask, because it's, again, like I keep saying, it's a totally different view from the materialist model of the mind, but also from a religious philosophical point of view, it's a very shocking concept if we compare with, Islam and, say, Christianity, because the qualities that a Buddha, a person who has accomplished Buddhahood, is said to have sounds exactly the way Christians would talk about the qualities of God. And that's pretty shocking to think you're saying, you mean, Rabina, that the Buddhists say you can become God. I mean, that would be the worst possible sin of pride. You'd go to hell for eons for that concept. So it's a very shocking concept to hear, But this is the radical difference in Buddhism. The Buddha is saying every sentient being, the Mahayana view, every sentient being has the potential to achieve this result. I mean, it's shocking from the psychological point of view, and it's shocking from the Christian and the creator religion point of view. Buddha's view is very different. That's why we have to be precise about these things and understand what we're saying, So then if this, we have to see, I mean, it's encouraging to us to think about how this is possible. Then we can posit this possibility of a person called Buddha. So the Buddha we're discussing here, of course, is the Buddha, of India 2,500 years ago. This is what we're discussing here. It's what we take refuge in. So the very first point here in this concept of refuge, they talk about we need to rely upon the absolute Buddha and the relative Buddha, the absolute Dharma and the relative Dharma, the absolute Sangha and the relative Sangha. So the Buddha then, as I've been saying, is a person whose mind, the Shakyamuni, a Buddha in general, the absolute Buddha is referring to Buddha mind, only the mind. So that's what they refer to in Sanskrit. The term is Dharmakaya. Literally, they've translated as truth body, but it's referring to only the mind, consciousness. So that when that is that enlightened mind, that omniscient mind, that mind doesn't need bodies. When you're on this path, as you get to some level of development, you don't need to be reborn. You've cut the root. You don't need bodies. You don't need bags of bones, So you have to try and conceptualize the actual Buddha mind, the mind of a person who is a Buddha, is the unmanifest, all-knowing, all-compassionate, all-powerful mind. And because mind isn't physical, think about this just conceptually, because mind isn't physical, any mind is not physical. Okay, right now, our mind is also not physical, but, you know, it's stuck in this body because of eons of delusions and eons of attachment and grasping. We've created the cause for our mind to be conjoined with this bag of bones, you know. Our mind also is profoundly limited in its capacity for cognition. We live at the level of sensory consciousness, which is completely limited. And we live at the level of, in terms of mental consciousness, we live at the level of conceptuality, which is concepts, thoughts, viewpoints, so that we live at a very gross level of our mind, you know, really the grossest level. But if we're looking at the mind of a person who is a Buddha, that consciousness, no longer is it encumbered by any delusions, and there's nothing limiting that mind. So quite literally, as we progress spiritually on our path to Buddhahood, what you're literally saying you're doing, you're literally expanding your consciousness beyond the limitation of your body, beyond the limitation of your senses, beyond the limitation of conceptuality, and your mind gets ever more subtle, but ever more powerful, ever more expansive, quite literally. As you get shamatha, even just shamatha, you've already accomplished the capacity for clairvoyance, which, you know, in the Western world is some hippy trippy kind of vague notion of remembering you were a 14th century princess or something. But here in the Buddhist view, and this is coming from the Hindus, this is a clear, precise, conscious, real awareness. And because you've accessed your subtler level of consciousness, having accomplished shamatha, that level of your mind necessarily can cognize subtler phenomena, such as the past, the future, the minds of others. This is all detailed in the literature, you know. This is the capacity of the mind. So here we're talking a mind that's absolutely purified of all delusions and completely full of all virtue. So that mind, the Dharmakaya, literally pervades wherever there is existence. The best we can do is use dualistic terms, you know. If mind is not physical and the mind of a Buddha is finally utterly purified and fully developed in all the good qualities, then literally that mind pervades wherever there is existence. It's a bit like saying, the Christians say, God is everywhere. It's exactly the same concept. That the energy, the mind of God, they don't talk about it like that, being infinitely wise, infinitely compassionate, infinitely powerful, literally pervades wherever there is existence. It's exactly the same that the Mahayana view is saying about a Buddha. So I always make this comment here that it seems to me over the centuries, all these human beings looking into the meaning of life have come up with many similar observations, it seems to me. I mean, it's rather heartening that kind, hard-working humans looking for the meaning of life have come up with many similar observations. And of course, our interpretations of them are different, and our concepts about how if you can become that or not, they're the differences, you know. So I always quote this. I remember telling sometimes when I was in Melbourne years ago, the Catholic University, because I was a Catholic, invited me to give a talk at one of their conferences, just 20 minutes. And so I decided I would talk about the similarities between the definition of God and the definition of Buddha. Because I remember this, I didn't know what to talk about at this conference. And I got there that morning to give my talk, and I just didn't know what to talk about. I hadn't decided. So I looked up the dictionary for the definition of God. 3 essential qualities: infinite wisdom, of course they use the Latin, omniscience, infinite compassion, and infinite power, omnipotence. You know, we like to use foreign words. They are exactly the qualities of a Buddha. So it's very fascinating. But the radical difference, of course, is that Buddhism says that every single mind, every person, every mind possessor can accomplish that. Everybody possesses Buddha nature. That's the Mahayana teaching. That's not in the teaching in relation to refuge, but I'm just discussing it here. So it's different, it's very fascinating. So Buddha mind doesn't need a body by that point. It pervades the universe. It has perfect wisdom. There's no longer any hindrances to, it's in touch with reality. And there's infinite empathy with every living being as if they were you, and infinite power to do whatever needs to be done to benefit sentient beings. And that includes, this is like science fiction. This is science fiction for us. When we read the Mahayana teachings, which is not in this module, we will later, you learn that there are different stages of development on the Bodhisattva path. So from the time you first achieved the realization of emptiness and you enter into the first of these 10 stages of development, heading to Buddhahood, each step of the way, already the first level Bodhisattva has the power to manifest their own mind in 100 different bodies simultaneously, solely for the benefit of sentient beings. So this literally is like science fiction. And then by the time you become a Buddha, your mind pervades the universe. It is in sync with reality. You have infinite compassion for every sentient being as if they were you. You only want to help them. You have the wisdom to know how, and you have the power to do so, which includes effortlessly and simultaneously manifesting your omniscient mind in countless bodies throughout countless universes for countless eons for the sake of countless sentient beings. Now that is a Buddha. I mean, it's kind of a big ask. It's like, sounds mental, insane just to present this with a straight face, But this is the Buddha's teachings. That's a Buddha. Now, please try and get our head around if it's possible to become this. To think of what a powerful person is, to think of what a compassionate person might be, to think about what a wise person might be. This is insane. So, how do we get, so the question is, if we are here trying to rely upon the Buddha in our refuge, how do you start to think, well, how am I going to prove this? Oh my God, this is insane. Well, it's all there in the teachings. It's all there in the literature. It's all there in the literature. It's not lost yet. All the methodology is there. But the point here is, it is there, but the point is we're presenting, this is the absolute Buddha, is the actual Dharmakaya, the unmanifest consciousness. That's the actual Buddha. So now you've got the relative Buddha, because this is the only one we can relate to. Who can see mind? Nobody. We can't communicate with Buddha mind. So out of incredible compassion, that's what motivated a person to become a Buddha. They don't need a body, but they will only want to manifest in bodies because that's the only way they can help peanuts like you and me. That's the relative Buddha. And the one we're discussing here is the historical Buddha, the historical Buddha. And this is known as the relative Buddha. And we're talking here the Namanakaya. That's meaning emanation body. So there are countless of them. As I said before, if the Dharmakaya, if the Buddha mind can manifest in countless forms, they can conjoin their consciousness with any of the 4 elements anywhere and manifest as anything they like. They have that power. So there's thousands and millions of these emanation bodies, but the one we're discussing here is they call it the supreme emanation body, and that's depicted by this, the statue behind me. Well, it's a picture, one of those pictures, isn't it? See, look, it's a picture from my room in Santa Fe. So that's the relative Buddha, and that's the one we can get hold of. That's the one we can read about. This is Shakyamuni Buddha. He's a supreme emanation. He's the 5th, I think. I don't remember the number. 5th, I think, in 1,000 Buddhas of this particular period of time. It's not a period of time that we would discuss in our history, in our concept of history. It's a much bigger period of time. And the next emanation body, the next historical Buddha, is said to be Maitreya. So this is Shakyamuni Buddha. He's the relative Buddha. And that's where we can do our homework. Okay, we've got to think about the meaning of Buddha, but at this point in time, in the Lam Rim, you don't study this too deeply, you know. You practice this as you go along, studying all the literature. We're just discussing the concept of what a Buddha is here. So the way then what we do, so then we need to rely upon properly is the relative Buddha. Because technically, as I just said, a Buddha doesn't need a body. So we would, of course, see that statue and we'll go, oh, there's the Buddha, we'll say. That's the Buddha, we'll say. If you were in India, I always say this, if you were in India at the time, you would have seen thousands of sadhus in their yellow robes, and they would all look the same. It's not as if you got one with a special halo saying, I'm the Buddha, I'm the Buddha. You couldn't tell the difference because you're not clairvoyant. So what do? You have to rely upon, if you're going to rely upon the Buddha, it's obvious. You better check up on his qualities. If you're going to rely upon a nutritionist, a doctor to give you future physical health, you'd better be confident. You do your research. You do your due diligence. You check up on this person. You have to do that. You've got no choice. It could be some peanut leading you up a garden path. So you have to have confidence in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, because you're going to decide to commit to those, to rely upon those as the basis of your practice. So you have to have confidence that you're not putting your reliance upon some idiot nutritionist who doesn't know what he's talking about. So the relative Buddha is the one we have to look at, the history of this person known as Buddha. Look into his life, look at his teachings. So what do? You have to, it's the same way they talk about checking up on a guru, because really Shakyamuni Buddha, they often refer to him as Guru Shakyamuni Buddha. And what that means is he at the time was the teacher. He was the teacher. You couldn't have anybody else but the human being in human form giving you Buddha's teachings. So it happened to be he was a Buddha and he was the teacher. So in the same way now, living in our world, 2,500 years later, we need to find another person, people who mightn't be recognized historically as Buddhas, but we need to research people we are deciding to call our guru, our spiritual mentor, whom we decide for us is the Buddha. It's the same type of research. We have to be confident. You don't just think, oh, I like the Buddha, he looks cute, you know. It's not very stable. You got to look into his teachings. You got to some degree, get some understanding, some confidence in the Buddha, and then his Dharma, and then the Sangha, the spiritual community. It's kind of logical. So you look at all the qualities. I mean, I just can't talk about all that. I don't remember all the details, but I know in the text, they talk about all the qualities of a Buddha. And I'm sure Venerable Dundrup, the Australian monk, whose teachings you've got in your course notes for this module, I'm sure he goes into that, you know, all the qualities of a Buddha. Then you have the Dharma. I mean, this is, you know, obviously the teachings of this person. Now, this is what's interesting. The absolute Dharma, is the actual knowledge in that mind. Think about that. The actual knowledge. That's the actual Dharma. I always use the example of, say, Bach. Here's, you know, Bach is the musician. But the Bach's music, actually, the music is the knowledge in Bach's mind. That's the actual music. Think about that meaning. It's the actual knowledge about the music. So, but out of his kindness, because we can't, you know, connect with Bach's mind, he kindly writes it down in that little notation language on a piece of paper. So now that's the relative music. The same here, Buddha's words. But they say this is the main thing we rely upon. It's pretty obvious. They talk about the power of speech. It's clear. A Buddha no longer needs conceptuality. They don't need that grosser level of consciousness, but conceptuality is the level we function at. So the only way a Buddha can communicate with regular people is to speak at our level in our language, which is conceptuality. So that knowledge in the Buddha's mind, which is the actual Dharma, has to be translated into words. And that's the main refuge. You can look at Buddha, 1,000 Buddhas every day, and they make you very happy to look at them. But until they open their mouth, you can do nothing. They express in our language, our conceptuality, their knowledge. This is the real refuge. It's really clear, isn't it? And they talk about the power of speech. This is the main gift of a Buddha, the power of speech. And they talk a lot about that. And it makes a lot of sense, you know. That's the relative Dharma. And that's the one we need. The books, the PDFs, the all our computers, our iPhones, our iPads, they are the containers of the knowledge that we need in order to practice. This is the advice. This is why in the Tibetan tradition, especially the Tibetans, I think, they honor it so totally. When they have put their statues in their altar, they put their books the highest of all. They treat their books with incredible respect. And in a way, this is something shocking to us because we love books in our culture, but we put them on the floor, we'd sit on them, we'd use them to prop up something. That would be like shocking for a Tibetan. With their books, they treat them as something so special. I think it's a wonderful concept, something you really value, because it is totally valuable to you. It's your method, it's your methods of how to stop your suffering and get enlightened. You know, it's unbelievable. So one cultivates that view. It's very special. Cultivate that view. And then you have the relative, the absolute Sangha and the relative Sangha. So then the absolute Sangha is actually all people who, from the first moment of having realized emptiness, you become known as a superior being, the Sanskrit Arya being. From the first moment of your non-conceptual direct insight into emptiness, you now are a superior being. So the relative Sangha, not just is all, the absolute Sangha is all Arya beings from the first moment of realizing emptiness up to and including all Buddhas. So it's a whole range of different people with different realizations, the fundamental one being the realization of emptiness. So the absolute Dharma, back to the Dharma, is also the knowledge not just in the minds of Buddhas, but in the minds of all Arya beings. So the absolute Sangha are all those beings. Now, we can't tell who is an Arya being. We can't tell who's got what spiritual realizations. You have no idea by looking. But we need to rely upon, think about this, this is very logical. If you've got no being on the planet who has the direct experience of how to make a cake, something as simple as that, then that knowledge is dead, isn't it? It's dead knowledge. There's a term in Tibetan, a knowledge holder, rigsen. It's a lovely meaning. So the superior beings, and therefore the superior, the absolute Dharma and the absolute Sangha is the knowledge in the minds of the knowledge holders. Not just the Buddha, but all the Arya beings. And that is what keeps the Dharma alive. If there's no longer any knowledge about enlightenment in minds, not in books, in minds, then the Dharma is dead. It makes such sense. So it's so meaningful, you know. So I know when all the Tibetans came out of Tibet, you know, the thing that was most urgent for His Holiness and all the other lamas, the other knowledge holders, they were desperate to find land in India where they could continue their monasteries, where they could pass on the knowledge from the older knowledge holders into the minds of the younger ones. So you keep it a living lineage. It's got real meaning. We kind of understand it, but we don't join the dots like this. I always think when I learned music from my mother, she was a knowledge holder of music. Where did she get it from? From her teacher. Where did they get it from? Their teacher. And you would track that right back, let's say to Bach for his music, you would track it in an unbroken chain of real human beings with real knowledge about music. It can't have died between Bach and my mother at some point and then be picked up again. That's almost impossible. It would just be myth at that point. It's real living knowledge. That's what a superior being means. And that's absolute fundamental necessity for the existence of Dharma anywhere. It doesn't exist in books, it exists in minds. This is huge meaning and very logical. So the Arya Sangha, the Arya spiritual community, the superior spiritual community, there's so many beings around with real experiences, but we can't tell who they are. So the Buddha then, he started his tradition of the ordained Sangha, anybody living in the fullness of the vows of his presentation of the body of knowledge about ethics, the Vinaya. So that's it. That's the criterion in Buddhism of the Dharma being a living thing in any one place, is the presence of 4 fully ordained men and women, men or women, right? I always tell this, but there's this story in Tibet. At some point, some Tibetan king was trying to kill off the Dharma, kill the Sangha and make the Dharma go away. I don't know who he was, but they were desperate to keep it alive, keep the lineage alive, and they needed the 4 fully ordained people. And they're running out of monks for a quota. I think 4 fully ordained nuns never occurred in Tibet. It never happened there. So they had to sneak over the border, some Chinese monk, in order to keep the quota, in order to carry on the lineage, the unbroken lineage of Dharma in Tibet. And this blue thing, you can't see it maybe, the blue thing we have here, see it? That's as an honor of respect to that monk. They must have worn blue, you know. So it's a really very great meaning, you know. And we can see what it means. I mean, you could get a book, you know, you could read some words. The Dalai Lama says, you could read the words and they would be good words because he said them, but then you hear them from his own speech. Everybody can see the difference because for him, it's coming from his genuine experiential knowledge. That's so meaningful. It's so real. We can taste the difference, you know. You can just read the words from a book, but when you hear it from the mouth of a knowledge holder, this is huge, you know. So the relative Sangha, and the Buddha says the presence of the Dharma is indicated by the presence in any one place of 4 fully ordained people, monks or nuns. So that's the essence of Buddha Dharma Sangha, just a brief thing. We've done an hour already, so now I'd like you to ask me some questions and we go into depth as we go along. And also you read the notes as well. So any questions there, Tara?
Let's see. Hands, nothing in the chat box yet.
Okay. Are there any questions?
Ah, there we go. Michelle.
Sure. Yes, please talk. Yes, Michelle. Hello, my dear.
Hi. Could you explain again what the difference is between a Bodhisattva and a Buddha? I don't really, I'm not clear about this yet.
No, of course, I understand. So a Bodhisattva, you know, is a certain level of achievement, a certain level of spiritual realizations. So the very first level we're describing here is the teachings that are known as the Hinayana teaching, as I've been suggesting. That's in the first of these first stages of this presentation in Tibetan Buddhism, known as the Lamrim. You with me there? So the very first stages, this work we're describing already so far about karma, this one of refuge, about the mind. We're going to talk more about that next time, about impermanence. All of these are the teachings of the Buddha that are they all are at certain levels. So these teachings are this level of the Hinayana teachings. If you go to Burma or Thailand, you'll learn exactly the same teachings. And internalizing all these teachings enables you to eventually achieve renunciation of suffering and its causes. And you learn to apply all these teachings. And then eventually, if you're going to achieve the Hinayana level of realizations and achieve your own nirvana, your own cessation of suffering and its causes, you would finish here at this middle scope. You'd think about impermanence. You'd understand about death. You'd think about the suffering of the lower realms. You'll want not to have suffering. You'll abide by the laws of karma. You'll then take refuge. You'll live in vows. You'll purify your mind every day. You go to the next level. You start to understand the mind very deeply. We'll go into that. You understand attachment. You give up attachment. You give up anger. You give up the delusions. You eventually get single point of concentration. You eventually realize emptiness. And at some life or other, you perfect that realization. You've cut all the delusions from your mind. You become what's called a superior, not a superior. Yes, that also, but you become what they call an arhat. You've destroyed the enemy, which is the delusions. And on that path, you then would finish there, and then you would not come back. You've achieved your own liberation, your own nirvana. That's the Hinayana part of the path. Okay? Yeah. Now, if you're on the Mahayana path, you will come back, even if you don't need to, because your motivation is this thing called bodhicitta, which is this attitude, which is the result of much compassion, very consciously developed love and compassion and all the good qualities. The next level of realization is this outrageous paradigm shift in the mind on the basis of much love and compassion. You have this attitude, you've cultivated this view that one, my job is only to help others, and two, I will never give up, no matter how many lives it takes to become a Buddha. So bodhicitta is the extra piece on top of the wisdom you've got that is the component of the person who is known as a bodhisattva. Bodhicitta means awakening mind. Bodhisattva is like a person who's got that. And then at some point, you keep working life after life, even if you don't need to, even if you've cut the route and you don't need to come back, your motivation is only to come back, to continue developing this outrageous bodhicitta to ever more profound levels, ever more outrageous levels of compassion, adding it to your wisdom. And then, you then are on the bodhisattva path. And the unique characteristic of the bodhisattva path is this extra practice of enhancing your virtues, enhancing love and compassion on top of your wisdom. And then you go through, and once you've realized emptiness, at some point you become on the first level, then the second, all the way to the 10th level, and then you finally graduate as a Buddha.
Okay. Yeah.
The bodhisattvas are on the path to becoming a Buddha.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, good one. Thanks, Michelle. So that all come later in the later modules, yeah. Who else, Tara? Anybody there, sweetheart?
Anyone? There we go, Miriam.
Hello, Miriam. Yes, talk to me.
Your microphone, dear.
Yeah, unmute, darling.
Microphone. Down in the bottom of Zoom.
It's not do. Oh, okay.
There you go.
Hey.
Thanks, Miriam. Talk to
Hey,
me.
hi, Venerable. The ordained Sangha is the relative Sangha, in short, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, that was it. Thank you.
Exactly. Anyone can be an Arya, the absolute Sangha, but you can't tell who they are. So you don't know how to rely upon them. Whereas at least you've got the relative Sangha. I mean, they might not be highly realized beings, but it's another discussion. At least the presence of them, this is Buddha's teaching, the presence of them is the criterion of the existence of the living Dharma in one place. Yeah. Finally, you've got to have the actual realized beings. Of course you have. That's the real knowledge. Yeah, that's right. That's the relative. Okay. Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
Yes, Zalo.
Hello, Venerable Rubina. Thank you very much for your teachings.
Yes.
You talked about five Buddhas, right? Like 5 Namanakayas, is that right? 5 Buddhas.
No, I talked about there's something like the current time in history, which is a very broad time for the Buddhists. We're in the time of 1,000 Buddhas, and the Shakyamuni, I forget if he's the 5th or the 6th of this 1,000. The next one is Maitreya. That's one thing I said. The other thing I said, there's the Dharmakaya, which is the enlightened mind, and then there's the emanation body, which is known as the Namanakaya. So in the Vajrayana, you have another type of body the Buddha manifests in, which is the subtle light body. You see it in all those pictures of Tara and Chenrezig and all those other Buddhas. That's mainly that's known as the enjoyment body. And that's not the discussion here.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
Because I know in the Vedas, the Vedas talk about Buddha is another reincarnation of Krishna. It's nothing to do with that, right?
No, that's not how the Buddhists talk. The Hindus love Lord Buddha, but their reference point is Shiva. And of course, they would say that Buddha is a manifestation of Shiva, but that's not how Buddha would talk, because he diverged from the Hindu philosophical views and came up with his own. So the Buddhists wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Yes, somebody else.
Monica, would you like to ask? Or I can read it. Monica has a question. She says, I didn't hear, you can just become a bodhisattva until one reach emptiness, until you reach emptiness. Phrasing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, there are different kind of crucial crucial stages in your development. So one would be a certain level of realization would be when you've got very genuine realization of understanding what suffering is and understanding the causes of it, and sincerely, with absolute certainty from the depth of your heart, wanting to give it up. That's renunciation. You renounce suffering and its causes. And the crucial component there is a very profound understanding of attachment. As Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, you've got renunciation when just the thought of another moment of suffering, just the thought of another moment of attachment is so disgusting. It's like being in a septic tank. So this is the first realization at this very first level of practice, the first and second scopes of the Lam Rim. To have that level of realization is obviously pretty advanced. I mean, the default mode for most ordinary people like us, the default mode is attachment. It's so primordially deep. We mightn't have very gross attachment, but it goes to incredibly subtle levels. So we have a long way to go to have genuine renunciation, genuinely understand the depth of the suffering that is caused by attachment and the other delusions, and genuinely committed to giving them up. That's pretty intense. So there's that level of realizations. So if you've got that, okay, never mind, that's fine. So then the next level of realization, that if you were going to achieve your own liberation, your own nirvana, you would then add to that, you'd get shamatha, single-pointed concentration, and then you would get the realization of emptiness. You would go in your concentrated meditation, you would do the analysis, and you'd eventually one day, see directly, non-conceptually, a direct insight into how there is no intrinsic I or anything else. That will be a genuine, direct realization of emptiness. And then you perfect that. And then at some point in one life or other, if you're going to finish there, you would then, when you die, you would not come back. you've achieved your own nirvana, your own liberation from suffering and its causes. But you got the next level of realization, or an additional one. That's the perfection of the wisdom wing, this analogy I always use. But if you want to perfect the compassion wing and you add that to the mix, then the goal is Buddhahood. So now, even though you don't need to come back, if your goal is, I want to benefit all sentient beings, then you practice accomplishing bodhicitta, this outrageous, as I said before, a paradigm shift in the mind on the basis of much love, compassion, great compassion, or the enhancing and the practicing of all the virtuous states of mind, that would eventually culminate in this accomplishment of bodhicitta, this shift in the mind, not just a moment of it, but it'll be a genuine, stable realization where there's no longer the thought of I, there's no longer the thought of asking anything for yourself. You're an outrageously amazing advanced person now with this incredible love and compassion for all sentient beings, and you're fully committed to never give up, no matter how many lives it takes, to complete this compassion wing, to complete this outrageous stages of bodhicitta, until eventually you become a Buddha. And then you unceasingly manifest around the universe in bodies to benefit countless sentient beings. I hope that answers. We're going into all of this as we go along. Any more questions there, Tara?
Yeah, there's another question here. Mary, would you like to ask? Or I will read it. Mary's asking, I would like to be, I liked hearing about the blue, in Venerable Rabina's robe. Can she talk about the maroon and saffron color?
I know, that's a really interesting point. I have no idea. I swear to you. I think it's just an organic process. I mean, the yellow the saffron was the color. You can see that when you go to India now, all these sadhus, these Hindu sadhus, they still wear these bright saffron robes, you know. So that obviously is how the Buddha dressed at the time. He would have looked like every other Hindu sadhu. But eventually the Buddhists in India, you know, they kept wearing those robes because India's hot. You know, they wore them on their naked arm and all that. It was Hindu tradition. But eventually, I'm quite sure, as they all went to Tibet, I mean, it would have been a shock to their system to be half naked in Tibet, in the snowy mountains, really high, you know, with mountains of snow, 6 foot of snow in the winter. So obviously they adjusted, it has to be logical. They adjusted their robes. You know, when you see old Tibetan robes, you see these thick yak wool robes. So my feeling is this is the only way I can think about it. The bright saffron, it translated into, we have this robe we do wear, which is still saffron, and we wear that at special occasions. But the maroon, my sense is, you know, as they adjusted it to the winter cloth, the color over the centuries got darker and darker and darker until eventually it's maroon. That's the only thing I can think of. There's no somebody at some point says, we're going to wear maroon. Except when it went to China, they wore gray and black. So it's obviously adjusting to different cultures. So I think maroon is just saffron changing over the centuries into these dark colors. That's my own observation. That's my own interpretation. So I have no idea what the colors mean. Every color has some meaning and they're used in multiple ways, but I do not know the answer. I'm so sorry. Sorry about that. Can't tell you anything. Hello, Barbara. Talk to me, sweetheart.
Hi, Venerable Rabina. Thank you.
Good.
When one becomes a bodhisattva or becomes a Buddha, that mind comes back for the sake of other sentient beings, is how I understand it.
That's right.
When one reaches nirvana, that mind does not come back. What does that mind then do?
That's a very good point. Okay, I'll tell you. Certainly in the Theravadan tradition, and even I think in some of the Mahayana traditions, because there are many schools of thought, the view is that once you've achieved that nirvana, when you die, your mind ceases. It's a very dramatic difference. Your mind ceases. There's nothing of you left. You are blown out like a puff of smoke. There is literally zero left. That's not the Mahayana view. The Mahayana view is you go into this subtle state of unbelievable bliss. Because you see, the mind in general, when it's free of delusions, the mind is naturally blissful. You can almost say the Buddha is telling us that a happy mind is the natural state of your mind when it's not deluded. We suffer because the mind is deluded. You know, the mind is angry and attached and jealous and miserable. They are the cause of suffering, quite literally for the Buddha. So we can even see with single-pointed concentration, this brilliant technique these Hindus invented. When you've even got some subtle level of concentration, there's no question your mind is completely blissful, but peacefully blissful, not like berserk blissful, because it's not driven by attachment. So this subtle state of nirvana, according to the Mahayana tradition, it's a subtle state of incredible bliss. And then they joke and talk about how at one point, after eons maybe of this bliss, the Buddha comes along and taps you on the shoulder and says, okay, honey, come out of this bliss now, come back into the human realm and go on to the Bodhisattva path, become a Bodhisattva so you can become a Buddha, so you can benefit others. That's what they say. That's what they say. So is that clear?
That is. Thank you. Thank
Good.
you, Venerable.
Okay. So it's very different interpretations. The Theravadins say you disappear completely, but one time His Holiness said, we Mahayanas have a problem with that. In other words, the Mahayana view is if you practice for eons and eons and eons becoming a Buddha, and then you die and you disappeared, what's the point? You know, kind of it's an absurd idea. But he didn't say that. I'm saying that. So your mind, because the Buddha's, the Mahayana view is your mind can never end. Never, it can, consciousness itself can never cease. It's beginningless and endless. Suffering can cease, absolutely, but the mind itself not. That's the different views. Somebody else.
Venerable, maybe we're hoping it's about the last 14 minutes. You could maybe share some fond memories of Lama Yeshe.
That's true, because it's now, it's the end of our day, isn't it? It's the end of our, okay. I mean, I'm happy to do that, yes. I mean, for me, the way to talk about Lama Yeshe is because I edit his teachings. It's a very easy way to see his extraordinary qualities, you know. I mean, I always talk about this, how it's so astonishing that when he turned up, when he started meeting modern people, they happened to be Western hippies. I think I can't stress enough how radically different the way we construct things, the way we talk, how radically different it is from the Tibetan way. So, you know, the way when I first heard Lama, I always say this, when I first heard Lama Zopa's classical presentation of the Lamrim teachings, those words, the way he said them would have been exactly the way they said them in the 14th century, the 12th century, the 10th century. It literally hadn't changed. It literally hadn't changed, you know. The framework, the basis, the implications, the assumptions, which is why it's extremely hard for us to get our head around it, hearing it from the tradition. But we can do it because we're grown-ups. We can do it. We can learn to think, you know. But Lama Yeshe, from the beginning of seeing modern people, the hippies, because you see what a person who is qualified, a Buddha certainly, or even high bodhisattvas, the real expertise of a Buddhist isn't just knowing all the knowledge and quoting all the texts and about this and about that. The actual experiential knowledge is the mind and how it works. The expertise of a great practitioner is the mind. There's no question about that. And so Lama could see, it seems to me Lama could see immediately, he could understand immediately how modern Western people thought, by our behavior, by the way we talk, because that's the skill, you see. So he didn't try to present Buddhism like the 14th century style. He spoke experientially about the mind. I can't describe how it blows my mind when I have to, listen to Lama's teachings and then transcribe them or check them, because Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive has transcribed most of the teachings. But when you edit a book, you get, and you check that all the words are accurate. I mean, first of all, sometimes you can't understand what Lama is saying. His English is so chaotic. He had no ego about it, you know. It was chaotic English, the weirdest structure, because he was so spontaneous. He couldn't have cared less about trying to impress people with his clever words, but he had this astonishing ability to choose the right words. This is all I can say. And then the effort he makes is what I noticed, the unbelievable effort he makes to find the right words, to express in 27 different ways, you know. It just blows my mind, the kindness of him and his incredible skill. There's just no question in my mind about that. And observing him teaching, observing people, how they responded to him, you know, it was absolutely, it really blew my mind. It really does blow my mind. That was what is, for me, the most remarkable quality, you know. But on top of that, of course, I mean, you would never know he was a realized being. He didn't have any aspect. I mean, Tibetans, you know, they're very traditional in their hierarchies. That's okay, it's fine, I'm not criticizing. But Lama didn't fit into any of the hierarchy. He escaped when he was 25, you know. He was born in 1935. He escaped in 1959. He's 24 or something. He hadn't finished his Geshe degree. He'd done all the studies. He was said to be really a good scholar, a great yogi, you know. And he escaped when he was 24, 25. He joined all the other 1,000 Tibetans in these places in this, like it used to be a prison in the time of the British. And they lived there. It was really repulsive, apparently. They all died like flies because they all got sick, living in the plain, living up in the high, clear air of Tibet and coming down to the plains of India was an incredible shock to their system. And they so commonly all got TB, you know, and many died. And so he joined all the other monks in these places, and they all studied together and practiced together. And that's where he met Lama Zopa. You know, Lama Zopa had escaped. Lama Zopa's a Sherpa. He's 10 years younger. And he had been in Tibet briefly. And then when 59 happened, he had to escape from Tibet. So he ended up in another route, ended up in the same place. And he was introduced to Lama. And that's when Lama took over, basically being his mum, you know, took after him and looked after him until Lama Yeshe passed away in 1984. So Lama just had this, so soon what happened was Lama Zopa got TB, and so Lama Yeshe took him to Darjeeling, which is higher up, to get a bit of clean air, you know. And it's then at about the mid-60s that they met their first Western teacher. And they both already at this point had just somehow decided they'd learn English, you know. They must have had some feeling of where they were moving with the English speakers. They just decided, because many Tibetans didn't learn English, not saying they should, but they just decided, you know. So, but they never, I mean, they'd learn it. But Lama just literally, and both Rinpoche as well, they picked it up, you know, they just learned it by listening, by observing. I don't know if Lama read very well. I mean, Lama Zopa reads. I'm not sure even Lama Yeshe read very well. He has to, he know how to write, but mainly it was his verbal language, you know. And he had this extraordinarily charismatic personality, unbelievably funny, unbelievably kind, unbelievably empathetic, like immediately. And I observed the times I was with him, you know, different times, that people were totally attracted to him. And especially women adored Lama Yeshe. But it was never like yucky, you know. I mean, some women fell in love with Lama Zopa, but became completely obsessed. They'd try to climb into his room and did crazy things, you know. But Lama Yeshe somehow was as clean as a whistle. But women just loved Lama Yeshe. This is so hilarious somehow. Everybody loved him. People just adored him. He's so funny, so joyful. And of course, so humble. You never knew he had realizations, you know, you never know that, ever. He was really, and that's something that's really expressed among the Tibetans. They say in the teachings that technically the more realizations you get, the higher you achieve spiritual realizations, the more simple you will appear, the more ordinary you will appear, you know. So Lama was certainly like that. I remember in 1982, and he was also radical. I mean, no, before 82, what happened, not 82, forget that. But I remember at Kopan, these students came, and in 1974, there was the first main group of ordination as monks and nuns among the Western students. A couple of people had been ordained already, but about 13 or 14 of them then became ordained as a big group, you know, 1974. And what was I saying? I forget what I was saying.
Zen Kopan.
That's right. I know, I forget. Oh, yes, somehow, yes, that's right. So there were several nuns and monks. So this young nun, Yeshe Kadro, who was then about 22 or 23, very cute Australian nun. You might know Nick Rebush, who runs Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive in Boston. Yeshe Kadro, who's Marie, and Nick were girlfriend and boyfriend. She was a nurse and he was a doctor. He was 10 years older. And they were the first group of students at Kopan in the early 70s. And they became monks and nuns at that time. So Lama appointed Yeshe Kadro, he called her Yeshe Kadro, as his attendant. And he went to South India to the monasteries later on, attended by Yeshe Kadro. This is unknown in Tibetan. You just, as a monk, you do not have a female attendant. You just don't do it. So it looked really shocking. But Lama Yeshe didn't care, you know. He didn't mind. There's all this gossip about people. Some of the Tibetans criticized Lama Yeshe, or he's just after their money and that kind of thing, because he had no status. He wasn't a Rinpoche. He wasn't a Geshe. He had no status. He was just this monk, you know, this young monk. He was nobody from the hierarchical perspective. So he wasn't, the Tibetans often, some of them, you know, the political ones, people being rude, naturally, didn't see his qualities, you know, just criticized him. And he must have been shockingly criticized, having this young, cute female attendant. People love to gossip, you know. He was so unusual like that. He didn't mind what people thought. He had no worry about ego, you know, because he was a realized being. But you could never say. He looked ordinary. And he behaved ordinary. Even the high lamas, they usually all dress, nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's good to dress nicely because people can respect you. But Lama dressed outrageously. He, you know, we call this a Zen, okay? And that's a donka. And our skirt's called a shemdup. Well, I insist on my shemdup and donka and Zen matching. I've got to look respectable. But Lama will wear a bright pink Zen, looked ridiculous, you know, this funny old cotton Zen. I remember in 1982 when Lama invited His Holiness the Dalai Lama to Europe on a big tour. Other people, other centers all joined in. There was this big tour of Europe in 82. So Lama was outrageous. He appointed 10 of us to be security guards for His Holiness, 5 men and 5 women. I mean, that was shocking for the Tibetans. They're so traditional. And I was one of those 5 women, you know. I thought I'd won the lottery. I was so excited. And he made us wear uniforms. We weren't allowed to wear our nun's robes. So I had hair at the time. I was a nun. And I had these little uniforms, the 5 women with these uniforms, and the men, there were 5 men. They wore white shirts, maroon ties, navy blazer, and gray slacks. They looked like nice boys, you know. And we women had to wear these nice tartan skirts, yellow blouses, and little red maroon jackets, right? And I had hair at the time. And I figured, well, as I'm going to look like a lady, I better wear lipstick. So I wore lipstick as well, right? And I was a nun. And Lama Yeshe always used to say to me, I think I like you better like that. So it was like Lama was outrageous. It was shocking. I mean, we didn't know what to do. We were just pretending to be security guards, you know, but how kind he was. He adapted immediately to cultures. You know, he did what was appropriate in sort of modern culture. So 5 men and 5 women. And we traveled with His Holiness for like 6 weeks. It was an amazing experience, you know. That's the kindness of Lama, you know, he's amazing, unbelievable. And he didn't mind what people thought. He was always on the cutting edge. He did always what was appropriate. He was humble, totally hid his own qualities. He totally hid his qualities. And you only know about his qualities because Lama Zopa, who's also a realized being, who's his main disciple, would tell us about his qualities, you know, praise his qualities. Extraordinary. He was a holy being. Like he had a bad heart. He had a missing valve. And as far as the medical profession was concerned, he shouldn't have been alive. Impossible. Impossible, but he was alive, you know, just by the power of his own realizations. And so he actually never slept in the day. He would go for a nap every afternoon, but he didn't actually sleep, Lama Zopa said. Because he is completely controlled in his own mind, he was able to go through the stages of subtlety of the mind, and he would look like he's asleep, but he was totally conscious at a subtle level doing these subtle meditations. But he looked like he slept, but he wasn't sleeping, Lama Zopa said. So as a highly realized being, but you cannot tell. And that's encouraging, you know. I mean, the same with His Holiness Dalai Lama. He acts like an ordinary person. So it gives us courage. We know they've got realizations, but they show humility. It's an incredible quality. It's very evident that it's necessary. That was Lama Yeshe. All right. So please read his teachings. And I'm his daughter. So if anything's rubbed off, I'm very happy. All right. So for the Tibetan New Year, then when they make all these resolutions, you know, the Tibetan New Year, they always clean up their houses and make it all clean and lovely, and they celebrate the new year coming. So let's just do that. Let's clean up our house, mental and physical, and all fresh and new, and you know, with a fresh attitude that we're going to make resolutions to never give up on our spiritual path, to never give up on our realizations, go one baby step at a time, never giving up on ourselves and others. All right. Thank you, precious ones. And please study the course notes. Venerable Dundrup, this Australian monk, my friend, he's given many good teachings in there. He will give you the details. I just give you a rough overview, okay? So please read the teachings and have questions for next week. Thank you, precious people. Jangchod, Semchog, Rinpoche, Make, Panam, Keguchig, Kiepa Nyampa, Mepa, Yang, Gongne, Gondu, Pabashog. And may we never develop, even for a moment, wrong views towards the deeds of our most precious gurus. And may their I forget the rest of it. May all their realizations come into our heart. Okay. Thank you, precious ones. Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Lars. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Venerable.
Much love, people. Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable.